stage forthwith. I declare the House in committee for consideration of the Prisoners and Victims Claims Continuation Reform Amendment Bill. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker. The House and Committee on the Prisoners and Victims Claims Continuation and Reform Amendment Bill, and the question is that Part 1 stand part. Andrew, are you seeking the call, Mr. Little?
Second call, yes.
Andrew Little.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to disappoint Tau Henare, but so our support for this bill is highly contingent, and we have considerable reservations, if indeed not anxieties, about this bill. And we understand the origins of it. The origins of the bill go back to the previous Labor government. And it dealt with a very confined, very specific set of circumstances. But it was to foreshadow a more comprehensive review of our victims' rights regime. Because this is not actually a victims' rights bill. This places victims' rights on the level of a lottery. That if you happen to have been violently abused and mugged and harmed and injured by a prisoner or by a perpetrator, who then, on serving a penal sentence, is him or herself then beaten up, abused, tortured or whatever, and then is successful in a claim against the Crown for that abuse, then you might have a claim as a victim. Well, that's not a victims' rights piece of legislation at all. We understand the confined nature of this bill. It originated under a Labor government, and we will continue to support it for that reason. But we have done so because we were given an assurance and an undertaking that there would be a proper review of our victims' rights regime. And this government made that undertaking. It said it would consult with other parties, including with us, and it has not done so. It hasn't fulfilled that undertaking. And so that work still remains to be done. My colleague Phil Goff talked about the impact of this bill since it was originally enacted. It has led to a total of $47,000 worth of compensation being paid to victims, out of a total of nearly $250,000 awarded to prisoners for the abuses they have suffered at the hands of the state. Now, sir, that's hardly a great rallying cry of a successful piece of victims' rights legislation. It simply isn't, because it is so chance-based and requires really some considerable degree of misfortune on the prisoner's side and you might say luck on the side of some victims. But that's not taking victims' needs seriously. And so that demand, that need remains unaddressed in this piece of legislation. And so, sir, if by passing this legislation we can give the government room to continue to consider the issue of a proper regime of victims' rights, they will have our cooperation in doing that. And I lay down that challenge and that invitation to the government. We know that that work still needs to be done. The government knows that work still needs to be done, and we should be concentrating our efforts and the efforts of this House on that. None of that means that we don't also ensure that the way we treat prisoners, those who are serving prison sentences, those who have been incarcerated by the state as a punishment for the conduct they have visited on other citizens, none of that means that we don't ensure that we fulfil our international human rights obligations, that we don't treat those who are in the custody of the state properly and with humanity, knowing that merely by being incarcerated they are serving their punishment. Simply by being sentenced to prison does not justify other abuses behind prison walls out of the public gaze. We understand all that, and that is a crucial part of our total criminal justice and correction system. But when it comes to victims' rights, let's not deny that there is something repugnant about the idea that somebody who has been the victim of the violence, serious violence of a criminal, or as indeed Phil Goff has pointed out, ripped off by a white-collar criminal to the tune of thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of dollars. Let's not deny that it would be repugnant if a victim of that sort of criminal was then to be able to stand by while that criminal was able to recover considerable compensation from the Crown for the wrongful treatment, a misguided prison manager, a misguided corrections officer who has mistreated them and leads to recovery for the prisoner while the victim gets nothing. That is unjust, and that still needs to be addressed. That issue needs to be addressed. This bill is a start towards addressing that, Mr. Chairman.
Andrew Little.
This bill is a start towards addressing that injustice, but it doesn't go anywhere near to dealing with it and addressing it fully. And so, Mr. Chairman, as I say, that work remains. That work remains. Sir, the effect or the impact of this bill since its inception, and as it will continue to do, means that those who do recover from the state, in the rare instance when that happens, and we have the Taunoa case and one or two others who have followed from it, but not many others, when the prisoner does recover, then it gets paid to the state, and various claims that can be made upon it are paid out, including recovering some of the costs that the Crown has incurred in bringing a prisoner to justice, and then money goes to the prisoner. Now, sir, it is important, if we are serious about victims' rights, that victims have a claim regardless of whether or not the prisoner is able to get some sort of windfall payment as a result of abuse by the Crown. And a proper victims' rights regime, and indeed a proper system of criminal justice, would say that those who have suffered at the hands of a criminal are able to recover once the criminal has served a term of penal servitude, if that is what the justice system demands, but that the victim can claim and seek and reliably expect to receive some sort of reparation or compensation for the material harm done to them. That's what a real victims' rights regime would provide for. That's what this bill, when it was enacted under the Labor government, ought to have led to. A proper, deliberate consideration of the needs of victims and reparation for victims, as opposed to this stop-start lurching from one remedy to a confined set of circumstances to simply rolling over the same remedy to the same confined set of circumstances. So that work needs to be done. So let the passage of this bill through this House at this time be a clarion call to this government and any future government to say, let's get on with that work. If we are serious about victims' rights and we understand the impact of serious crime on victims, whether it's violent crime, whether it's white-collar crime in the nature of fraud and generally ripping people off, let's have a proper and serious considered look and conversation about what might be done to more reliably give assurance to a victim that they can get justice beyond simply seeing the perpetrator of the crime against them banged up in jail for a period of time and deprived of their liberty. Because that, to the victim, is of limited use when they have been deprived of their ability to go about their ordinary business and their life, deprived of their future if their funds have been ripped off them. That's the real challenge laid down by this bill. We are up for that challenge. We are up for that conversation with a government that is interested in doing that, and I know there will be other parties will be as well. But let the passage of this bill at least lead to that process. Let's hear from the Minister and the Chair that he is prepared to give that assurance so that we can, at some point in the near future, look back and say we have a world-class system not only of criminal justice but of victims' justice and victims' rights as well.
I call David Clendon.